Welcome back to the deep dive. So, if you're starting to use generative AI tools, like ChatGPT or Gemini for serious work, and by serious, I mean anything more than just summarizing one document, you've likely hit a bit of a wall. You ask for, say, deep analysis, but what you get back feels, well, polished maybe, but still kind of mediocre. Or you ask for innovation, and it just gives you the Wikipedia version of innovation. Today, we're really going to try and tear down that wall. We're looking into advanced prompt engineering techniques, the kind specifically designed to push the AI, to force it really to produce genuinely complex, multidimensional cognitive output. We're not just talking about writing slightly better instructions here. No, this is more about designing the AI's entire critical thinking architecture. Okay, let's unpack this.
Right. Our mission essentially is to move you beyond being just a simple information seeker. We want to help you become more like a cognitive architect for these tools. The idea is to unlock their real potential by teaching them how to simulate that high-level human intellectual conflict. How to debate, disagree, and synthesize information from deeply entrenched, diverse viewpoints.
And to really grasp why this kind of complexity is so necessary, let's start with a topic that absolutely demands depth. The whole concept of immortality. If you're maybe newer to prompt engineering, your first attempts at tackling something huge like this, they're probably going to be pretty linear. You'd probably start with the most basic prompt you can think of. Describe immortality.
Yeah, and that gives you a solid, but ultimately, surface level output. It
Yeah.
defines the term, maybe throws in a couple of historical references. It's fine, like for the first paragraph of a high school essay,
Yeah.
but not much more.
Okay, so you level up pretty quickly. You try a persona prompt. You are a renowned philosopher. Explain immortality.
Hmm.
Now you've added an angle, right? Given AI a specific worldview to sort of inhabit.
That's definitely better. Certainly, it'll bring in classical thought, maybe some ethical frameworks, but it's still limited, isn't it? It's stuck within the scope of that single persona.
Uh-huh.
The philosopher can talk about Plato all day, but they aren't really equipped to discuss, say, telomeres or the logistics of resource allocation if nobody ever dies.
Right. So maybe you try combining things, a combination prompt. You are a cynical philosopher. Explain immortality to a high school student. So you've added cynicism, constrained the audience. This is standard good practice, sure, but the core problem is still there. You've got a single voice speaking into, well, a vacuum.
That's exactly the limitation we need to overcome. Real-world decision-making, whether it's strategic planning or deep philosophical exploration, it absolutely requires multiple, often conflicting perspectives to generate genuine insight. Think about a brainstorming meeting. The magic often happens when the finance head argues with the marketing director, right? We need the AI to replicate that kind of internal friction.
Which brings us neatly into our first core technique. And this is where things start to get genuinely complex. Multi-agent prompting. So this involves telling the AI to take on multiple distinct personas, we call them agents, and then you require them to actually engage in a simulated discussion or debate on the topic. You basically turn that single AI response box into a virtual roundtable of experts.
Right. Using our immortality example again, your prompt becomes much, much richer. You might instruct it something like, okay, there are three personas here, a scientist, a student, and a mother. The scientist needs to introduce the current medical possibilities. The student should raise ethical objections and questions about social change. And the mother, she must focus on the emotional and familial implications of living forever. Crucially, they have to respond directly to each other and keep debating until I tell them to stop.
And what's really fascinating here is the immediate difference you see in the output quality. Instead of that philosophical summary we got before, now you have the scientist talking about specific genetic markers, the student challenging the very definition of a meaningful life, and the mother asking things like, well, if I never age, how do I even relate to my great-great-grandchildren who are still going to die? Ooh, you get contrast, you get conflict, and that generates genuinely diverse dimensions of the problem. Okay, I definitely see the power in setting up that debate.
Yeah.
But if you just define the roles quite simply, scientist, mother, student, aren't we just relying on the AI's most basic stereotypes of those roles? I mean, what if the scientist is actually a more holistic thinker? Or maybe the mother is also a CEO? How do we make sure these personas have the depth needed for a real deep dive?
That's an excellent question. It takes us straight into the enhancement phase. Multi-agent prompting gives us the volume and the diversity, sure. But to get real depth and empathy, we need to sort of turbocharge those agents. And we do that using a key psychological principle.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. We call this the theory of mind, or TOM hack.
Right. Theory of mind, Tom, it's absolutely foundational to how humans interact. It's our ability to attribute intentions, beliefs, emotions, goals, both to ourselves and to other people. When an AI role plays, it's essentially attempting to mimic this Tom. It assumes, okay, a scientist cares about data, a mother cares about family, basic stuff.
But those initial assumptions are often just, well, shallow archetypes, aren't they? So the goal of integrating this Tom hack is to stop the AI from simply acting out a trope, and instead force it to build a more complex, empathetic persona that's rooted in specific verifiable intentions, which should lead to richer context and maybe even genuinely surprising responses.
Exactly. And to achieve that depth, we use an iterative process. We explicitly call it the cognitive loop. It's a defined two-step feedback loop where we actually refine the personas based on the AI's own understanding of their motivation.
Okay, so walk me through that. Step one of this cognitive loop. It happens after the initial multi-agent debate has generated some output.
Precisely. You don't just ask them to keep going. First, you pause the debate. And you ask the AI to reveal its internal blueprint for the roles it just played. So you prompt it something like, now, pause the debate. Describe the underlying assumptions and motivations you assign to each persona based on the theory of mind.
Hang on a second, though. Doesn't that extra step, asking the AI to self-analyze, to reflect on its own assumptions, doesn't that significantly increase the token count? And the cost? I mean, is this actually practical for everyday use, or is it really just for those super high-stakes, really complex tasks?
That's a critical point. You're right. Efficiency matters. Yes, it absolutely increases the token usage. There's no getting around that. But here's the thing. For complex, mission-critical tasks, the jump in output quality, the reliability, it generally outweighs the extra cost. You're essentially paying for deeper insight and reliability, not just more words. If you need, say, a comprehensive risk assessment for $1 billion project, spending a few extra dollars in tokens to make sure the thinking isn't based on shallow stereotypes, that feels like a pretty good bargain. So for instance, when we prompted the AI to analyze the mother persona, the self-analysis might come back detailing assumptions about her, Tom, that she prioritizes relationships, emotional well-being, values centered on family continuity, that kind of thing. But crucially, the AI might add another layer. You might note that this focus on continuity and relationships often reflects a collectivist societies, maybe mentioning regions like India, Latin America, or Southern Europe, where community and family are primary values. And that insight informs her debate points.
Ah, okay. That's the key bit. That's the proof that the AI is actually thinking more deeply. We now know the precise internal model it's using for that agent. If the AI hadn't shown us that cultural underpinning, we'd never have known it was there. Got it. So now we can move to step two. Refine and reintroduce the enhanced persona.
Exactly. We leverage that self-analysis to make the persona less generic, more specific. So, sticking with the mother persona, we might tell the AI, okay, your assumption that the mother focuses primarily on emotional continuity is correct.
Oh.
But let's add nuance. She's also pragmatic, and perhaps comes from a low-income background, which requires her to consider immediate economic and cultural challenges too. Adjust this perspective and continue the discussion.
Wow. Okay. So that simple, targeted refinement based on the AI's own stated internal logic forces the agent to incorporate these external pressures. Suddenly, the mother isn't just, feeling sad about losing the natural cycle of life. She's asking things like, okay, how will a lack of generational wealth transfer affect society? And who actually pays for the resources needed to support an eternally growing, consuming population?
Precisely. This iterative cognitive loop adapts the AI's understanding of its roles. And the result is interactions that are just exponentially more nuanced, more layered, and often quite unexpected. You're not just getting an answer anymore, you're actively designing the process of critical synthesis.
This whole conversation about immortality and, theoretical ethics is really fascinating, but let's try and connect this back to practical reality for the listener. How does this kind of heavier two-step process, multi-agent, plus the Tom loop, actually translate into, say, boardroom insights or daily product development work?
Well, it translates perfectly. Because complex business challenges are every bit as multidimensional as philosophy, maybe more so sometimes.
Okay, give me an example. Let's take corporate decision-making. Say a large bank is trying to decide whether to rapidly roll out several new internal AI tools. If they use a simple linear prompt, they'll just get a checklist, right? Pros and cons. But if they use this cognitive loop method,
then they get a genuine simulation of internal conflict and, crucially, risk assessment. You structure a debate with, let's say, 3 key agents. The Chief Information Officer, CIO, focused purely on technical implementation, scalability, speed. Then the Chief Executive Officer, CEO, focused on long-term ROI, organizational alignment, public perception. And critically, the cybersecurity head,
whose job is to highlight every possible risk, every compliance failure, every potential legal exposure.
Right. So the CIO is pushing for speed, the cybersecurity head is hitting the brakes, arguing for caution, and the CEO is demanding maximum risk mitigation but at minimal cost. That classic tension. And because you've used the Tom hack, the cybersecurity head isn't just reciting regulations from a manual, they're speaking with the motivation of deep personal accountability, perhaps, anticipating worst case scenarios with real urgency.
Exactly. And that simulated risk assessment meeting, it can generate a comprehensive list of trade-offs and potential mitigation strategies in minutes, something that could otherwise take weeks of human-led meetings managing egos and schedules.
Okay, that makes sense. Or what about product development? You're building new features for a mobile app. The big failure point for most teams is designing in a silo, right? So you could use the multi-agent approach there too. You'd set up a debate between maybe the developer persona prioritizing functionality, clean code, technical feasibility, the marketer persona advocating for user-friendly design, feature excitement, strong branding, and crucially, an end-user persona sharing that often visceral feedback on real-life usability, which might contradict both the technical vision and the branding strategy.
hmm And the output there instantly flags potential friction points, technical debt, user frustration. For example, the developer agent might propose a complex, highly integrated feature, but the end user agent immediately responds, hang on, that takes 3 too many clicks, I'd probably abandon the process right there.
Hmm.
And then the marketer agent has to figure out how to reconcile what's feasible with actual user behavior.
Okay, one more. Moving back towards bigger picture stuff. Cultural analysis, if you want to really understand the impact of something like global trade liberalization, a single linear report just feels inadequate.
Completely inadequate. You need that dynamic debate. Imagine a historian persona focusing on patterns from past globalization waves, cultural preservation angles. Then, maybe a local artisan persona highlighting the immediate impact on traditional crafts, community livelihoods. And finally, a global entrepreneur persona focusing on scaling opportunities, expanding market access. And again, each agent has to articulate not just their facts, but their underlying beliefs and motivations. That's the Tom layer doing its work. What's fascinating here is this synergy you get. The combined power of multi-agent prompting plus the cognitive loop delivers really 3 critical benefits all at once. First, you get genuinely diverse perspectives because you're forcing that simulated debate. Second, you achieve enhanced context because the Tom refinement leads to deeper, more empathetic, sometimes culturally aware discussions.
And third, and maybe most importantly for practical applications, you get actionable solutions. By mirroring the structure of successful human brainstorming, the ideas that come out are generally more robust, more thought through, maybe more ready for implementation. Whether you're tackling a philosophical question or a corporate crisis, the output shifts from being just descriptive to genuinely cognitive. So, what does this all mean? I guess the core lesson here is that just relying on passive prompts, well, it's only ever going to get you passive output, predictable output. To unlock the real cognitive potential of Gen AI for these complex topics, you have to proactively design the input structure itself. Merging multi-agent prompting with that sophisticated self-analyzing leverage of the theory of mind cognitive loop, it really shifts the AI, doesn't it? It goes from being a passive answer machine to more of an active internal consultant team.
Exactly. And ultimately, this whole method encourages you to think differently, not just about what facts or information you need, but critically, who should be delivering that information within the simulation? And even more importantly, why do they hold that particular perspective? What are their underlying motivations and assumptions? The real key, I think, to getting complex, reliable, deep AI output lies in design of the critical thinking process itself before the AI even starts generating its first word. That's how you control the depth. That's how you really get the deep dive.